Chapter 7. The Gate. Aliana backed away, holding her hands out protectively. The two massive feline monsters crept forward, backs arched and teeth bared. The first one snapped at her. Aliana jumped back and reached for her dagger, strapped to her thigh. She gripped it backwards in her hand, holding it up with the blade towards the beasts. The second one lunged forward and she ducked, rolling underneath it. Its massive muscular body skidded on the ground, kicking up dirt as it recoiled like a spring and whirled to face her. She was surrounded. A chimera on both sides. She could barely take one. She had no chance with two. As the monsters readied to pounce, she threw herself backwards. The two creatures plowed headfirst into each other mid-jump. They scratched and growled as they struggled to free themselves of the sharp, furry tangle, their snake tails lashing out in every direction. Aliana pushed herself to her feet and readied for the next attack. She was panting and her heart was racing way too fast. After this, she could believe that dying of fright was possible. Finally, the chimera pushed away from one another and turned on their target. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it would explode. She held up her knife, her hands shaking. This was it. This was where it ended. One of the creatures charged. Acting completely on instinct, she ducked under the chimera's claws, slashing at its leg as it sailed over her. It let out a short yelp before it stumbled across the floor and into the darkness of the tunnel. The other one growled. She spun to face it, hoping the other would stay lost in the shadows. She held out her dagger, unable to hold it steady. The chimera lowered its head, ready to pounce. Aliana lunged aside, somersaulting into the rocky wall. The cold stone dug into her back. She felt a stream of blood drip down the side of her face. A drip pooled at the corner of her mouth, the salty liquid seeping onto her tongue. The monster turned on her, growling. Aliana wiped the blood from her lips and tightened her grip on the knife. The chimera whipped its serpent tail at her. She caught the snake at the base of its head, struggling to hold it away from her face. Her arm started to shake as the 5 feet of pure muscle writhed against her grip. As her arm gave out, she screamed and slashed her knife through the snake's body. The chimera yelped and jumped away. Panting, Aliana pushed herself to her feet, pain shooting through her body. Someone grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms to her side. A familiar, impossible voice hissed in her ear. "Why didn't you save me?" Her father's words paralyzed her. "I couldn't." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I was so young." "You could have done something." Her father spoke harshly. "You could have died instead." Aliana's heart leapt into her throat. "My life was better without you." Her father's fingers dug into her arm. "It would have been better if you'd never been born." Tears streamed down her face. Aliana cried out and stabbed her knife solidly into her father's stomach. He screamed, the noise turning into a pained roar. He released his grip. Aliana wriggled free and stumbled back, her whole body shaking. She had no idea what these monsters were, but this was a sick trick. The chimera tackled her to the ground, holding down her arms and growling in her face. Saliva dripped from its fangs. The acidic fluid burned her skin. She forced herself to look the beast straight in its fierce yellow eyes. "You're not real. I'm not afraid of you." The monster cocked its head. It inched its face closer to hers. She held her breath, but it just sniffed her. With a snort, it leapt off of her and returned to its platform, shifting back to its original bronze form. The one that had taken the form of her father did the same. It lurched and expanded, returning to its monstrous form. With a final creak, they froze and stiffened back into statues. She let out a long, shaky breath and sat up. Standing, she slipped the knife into its sheath and took a hesitant step forward. The statues didn't move. She steeled herself and moved towards the gate. It opened before she could touch it. She bit her bottom lip, took one last look at the monstrous statues, and walked into the realm of dreams. The sheer vastness of the bright realm stole her breath. It was impossibly massive. The cloudy ground retreated, revealing the greenest grass she had ever seen. It seemed to stretch on forever. The ceiling far above looked deceptively like open sky. She looked back at the gates, as the gates closed behind her. No going back now. As she pressed on farther into the oasis, she was greeted by the smell of fresh-baked cookies, her father's shampoo, and the old cat that she had made her father let her keep. Her heart swelled with emotion, and it brought tears to her eyes. In the distance, there was a low hill. Perched on top of that was an extravagant castle, the Palace of Hypnos. That's where she would find him, the one who could give her the answers she needed. That's where she'd find Morpheus.